I'd like to welcome you to the forum featuring the candidates running for the East Lansing City Council in the general election, which takes place on November 5th, 2019. I'm Dorothy Engelman. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of the Lansing area, and I'm a resident of Holt. This forum is being sponsored by the League of Women Voters of the Lansing area, which is a nonpartisan organization that does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. If everyone would please silence their cell phone, that would be helpful. Also, there are no pictures allowed except for by the press, so if you want to just turn off your phone, that would be great. We are being taped tonight by Advanced Video Professional Company, and we will have access to this tape online later. For the last 99 years, the League of Women Voters has engaged and educated voters with a firm commitment to nonpartisan politics. Our local league represents men and women from Clinton, Eaton, and Ingham counties. Among many activities, including candidate forums and voter registration drives, we compile and distribute printed voter guides, provide access to election information online at vote411.org. There are 6 candidates on the ballot for the East Lansing City Council. 3 will be elected to serve a 4-year term. The candidates are Eric Altman, Lisa Babcock, Jesse Gregg, Mark Meadows, John Rivette, and Warren Stanfield. Candidates' responses to questions were posted on vote411.org and have been printed out for you. If you did not receive one of these on your way in, please raise your hand and one of the volunteers will bring you one. We're all out, so I guess if you didn't get one, you can share. It also is, everything is on vote411.org online. So if, when you get home, if you have more questions. The East Lansing City Council is the legislative and policy-making body for the city government. The mayor and mayor pro tem are appointed by the elected council. The council also appoints the city manager, who's responsible for the day-to-day administration of the city government. They also appoint the city attorney. Questions for the candidates can be written on note cards and handed to the volunteers from the league, who will bring them to the screeners for consideration. Screeners may combine questions or edit them for clarity. The only way you may ask a question is to write it on a card. So if you didn't get a card and would like one, raise your hand, and they must be screened. So if someone can, I just saw one hand go up, if someone could take her a card to write on, that would be great. We're all set? Thank you. The screeners for the audience questions are Judy Karanjeff and Marty Correttis. I knew I was going to do that. We talked about it ahead of time. Correttis. Both are members of the League of Women Voters and East Lansing residents. The timer is Joanne Winkleman, who is also a member of the League. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement to sell themselves. We would like them in their opening statement to provide the qualifications for this position that distinguish them from another candidate. They will also have 1.5 minutes to answer each question and 1 minute for a closing statement. Candidates are reminded that they are to restrict their answers to their position on the question asked and not to make any personal comments or remarks about any other candidate. Audience members are also asked to be respectful of the candidates and the forum format. Please hold your applause until the very end of our forum so that, as I said, we can have more time for candidate questions and answers. We will now begin with the opening statements of the candidates. The order of this was drawn prior to the beginning of this meeting. The questions will then be rotated among the candidates, and closing statements will be given in reverse order from the opening statements. We will begin with opening statement from Eric Altman.
Thank you all for coming tonight, and thanks to the League for putting on this very important event. The city is in better shape than it was 4 years ago. We got the bank buildings torn down. We got the city's finances stabilized. These were the big issues that defined the 2015 election. And I was a key part of the team that got those problems solved. And now we can turn our attention to some bread and butter issues that maybe we haven't been able to. One that I think is doable is starting to power city operations with solar power installations on city buildings and city property. This is an investment that we can make now that our budget is stable, and it will cut operating costs in the long term as well as cutting emissions. A slightly harder project is to fix the dam sidewalks as well as the dam roads. We have a plan for the roads. Actually, here in East Lansing, we don't have one for the sidewalks, but we need one because they're in terrible shape, as I have found out firsthand the past 4 months. And people have been patient, and we want a walkable city. The moonshot for me is to start burying power lines. We would like to let our trees grow. We would like the junk out of the sky in our backyards. We would like to keep the power on during severe weather events, which are getting more frequent. And it's time to upgrade our capacity anyway, because we want to get ready for the day when there's an electric car charging in every garage. There are other issues that have come up in my conversations with people around the city the past 4 months as I've been canvassing. In the neighborhoods close to the campus, we need to be more proactive about the mayhem and the party noise that is really starting to wear people down there. I would like to look at a protected bike lane along Bircham Road because of all the schools there. I think that would be an excellent location for one. These are bread and butter issues that make a difference in people's lives. Local government is the right place to solve these issues. These are the kinds of things I want to work on if you send me back to council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Meadows, you're next.
Good evening, everybody. And I'll thank also the League of Women Voters, not just for this event this evening, but for all the events across the state of Michigan, across the country that they sponsor, so that people in the community get to know their potentially elected officials and get to ask questions of them before the vote is actually taken. I don't think I've been to one of these things with this many people in the room previously, and I want to just congratulate all the people who have decided to come out this evening. It underscores the importance of this election and the fact that things have changed in East Lansing. And I think as I go through the neighborhoods, I hear people who are very happy about some things and very unhappy about others. I think we need to address that as a city council as we go forward. Eric mentioned the sidewalk plan, and at one point in the history of this city, we did have a 10-year plan for fixing the sidewalks and fixing the roads. And in the last 4 years, we've encouraged DPW to also create another plan like that, and I think we will get that successfully implemented. The city has also addressed, I think, very aggressively some of the environmental issues that we've faced as a community. And while we mentioned EV and the charging stations, there are other environmental activities that are ongoing, including an additional solar array that we will probably have in the community. For me, as I've said many times, the number one issue that I've always faced and felt that I've been able to help with is neighborhood preservation. So I'm hoping that you'll return me once again to the City Council so I can continue the work that the City Council has so aggressively pursued over the last 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. Meadows. Next up is Ms. Babcock.
Well, good evening. Thank you all for coming out tonight. It's a blustery gray day, and many of us would be tempted to stay home with a fireplace, a book, a pint of ice cream in my case, but as you will. This is part of why I love East Lansing so much. There is such a vibrant community spirit here, and people are so engaged and so involved. My name is Lisa Babcock, and I'm running for City Council because I love East Lansing. I love the library. I love the art festival. There are so many things here that are just unique to East Lansing. I will say I wish the City Council would make better decisions, and that's why I decided to run. I was not pleased with the eBay sale, and I was not pleased with the use of HUD money for the city attorney's private office building. I think we could make better decisions, and one night, as I was in the kitchen talking to my much better half about this, he said, well, you should run. And I said, me. And he said, yeah, you. And I was like, well, fine. And he said, fine. And I said, fine. And here we are, if you've ever had a conversation like this with your spouse. I'm an attorney. I've spent most of my life in public service and government. I am honest. I'm hardworking. I like to solve problems. And I would be honored to have your vote.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just ask the candidates, would you please bring your microphones closer to you? Some people are having difficulty hearing, so when you're speaking, if you would speak directly into the microphone and speak louder. Also, some folks may have come in late. We do have a no picture policy with the exception of the press, so please no pictures with cell phones, with also the exception of the League of Women Voters, who she's allowed to take a picture with her cell phone. So, thank you. Our next one is Mr. Rivette.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. My name's John Rivette, and I'm looking to join the City Council of East Lansing. East Lansing's been Diane and John Rivette's home for 28 years. I'm running to try to make East Lansing an even more vibrant, more inviting, smartly governed city that welcomes everyone, and I'll talk more about that, downtown and into our neighborhoods. I think some of my skills and background make me uniquely qualified, and that'll come up as we go forward. But in terms of East Lansing, I've been involved not only as an active parent who down the hallway they have children's theater going on and brings back memories. I worked for 36 years for the university. During that time, I did different service, including I was the university's faculty grievance official for 8 years, trying to resolve disputes between faculty, administrative staff, and their leadership, their dean, director, chair. There were 5,700 people that could use that office. Most of them didn't, but it was still a busy and enjoyable one, and it gave me a chance to use my skills in dispute resolution, listening, creative problem solving. I taught for MSU for 36 years in the labor relations area. In terms of the city, I was on the Parks and Recreation Commission for 7 years, was in this building many times. I was on the Farmer Market Committee to get it revived for, I think, 3 years. And almost every year I helped volunteer for arts, jazz, or folk festival in different ways. I got involved in part because of the deer issue. I could show you pictures, but I guess I'm not supposed to show you pictures either. We lived here from 1991 till about 4 or 5 years ago and saw maybe 2 deer. I saw 4 last night. So something has changed. I know that's anecdotal evidence, but I think it's pretty clear. So I hope to be involved.
Mr. Stanfield?
Wait for the timer to. All right.
No.
We good? All right. I'd like to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for gathering us here tonight. I did not know there were this many beautiful women within the city of East Lansing. I mean, good Lord. I love it here. I am currently a student at Michigan State University, formerly a wrestler, double majoring in pre-law and political science. I currently work for Senator Adam Hollier at the Michigan Senate. I am 20 years old. I think I am the only person here whose parents are in attendance, my mother and father. I wanted to run for East Lansing City Council for a couple of reasons. Number one, transparency. We need to have everyone involved in this government. Number two, affordable housing. There's no reason someone should go to Michigan State University for undergrad and grad school and can't afford to live in Michigan State University. We have some of the most talented and creative people in the world here, and they need to be able to stay here. And that's about it. You know, very happy to be here. Very happy to be a member of this community, and I love the city.
Thank you, Mr. Stanfield. And Ms. Gregg, you're next.
I'm Jessie Gregg, and I'm running for council because I have experience and perspectives that are not currently represented on council, which are important to include in our public conversation. Currently, I serve as the vice chair of the Ingham County Parks and Recreation Commission, where I've been involved with the implementation of Ingham County's Parks and Trails millage. I also serve on the East Lansing Arts Commission, and I've been a vendor at the East Lansing Arts Fair, selling my own artwork, and I have served on the jury for that festival for many years. I'm also a small business owner. I have a small store downtown East Lansing, and I've seen the concerns of local business owners who came to provide input at council disregarded. I've seen their veracity questioned. I think it's time that we have someone in council who understands the complexity of keeping a business going. I'm also a parent with 3 small children who are in the East Lansing public school system. Houses in my neighborhood are selling quickly, and they're selling to families with small kids. As I've been knocking doors around town, I've been told that the same thing is happening in other neighborhoods. People are moving into our city for the strong schools and the close-knit neighborhoods, and we need someone on council who can understand the needs of growing families. I've also written about East Lansing City Council. For the last 2 years, I've been a reporter for East Lansing Info. I've felt the frustration of trying to accurately cover City Hall while repeatedly hitting roadblocks in the form of unanswered questions, late or incomplete answers. These feelings have been validated in my door-knocking conversations where residents tell me that they've shown up to public hearings and community engagement sessions only to have their feedback disregarded while development projects continue as planned. Our citizens feel cut off from their representatives, and they've stopped trying to engage with their government. I've pushed for transparency from the outside, and I would like the opportunity to continue to push from the inside, which is why I'm asking you to vote for me for City Council.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gregg. We'll now begin with audience questions, and it's a wonderful segue for the first question, which we will begin with Mr. Altman and go right down the table, and then we'll rotate as we go through. First question is, what are you going to do to advocate for and foster transparency of the East Lansing City government? You'll have 1.5 minutes, each of you, for your response.
So that's a great question. And when we're talking about things like transparency and other things, also I prefer to talk about sort of specific details about what might have happened in a particular episode that seems to help the conversation stay focused. So I'm going to talk about a bunch of details. I may be the only candidate at this point who has posted their campaign contributions on their website. My contributions have all been posted there since early September, and I will keep them updated through the election. That is in the interests of transparency. Soon after I got elected, we passed an ordinance requiring council members to disclose campaign contributions from people who have business before the council. That was in the interests of transparency. We made Freedom of Information Act requests easier to make. There's now a web portal that steps you through the process. We made FOIA requests easier to track. Anybody can now get on the city website and see what everybody else is asking for. We started recording discussion-only meetings as well as business-only meetings of the council because we wanted people to see what we were thinking as well as how we were voting. We started sending out a digest after every council meeting with a summary of what happened as well as links to the original documents and the video so people could figure out what really happened for themselves. We could be better when we do an infrastructure project in a neighborhood. We could be better about consistently communicating with residents about what's going to happen so they have a chance to have their questions addressed. We've had some real successes along those lines, but some not so successes, and so there is room for improvement. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Babcock, same question.
Thank you. One of the reasons I'm running is transparency. I want to be positive because I love this community, but I will promise you this, there will be no backroom deals. There will be no auctions with hand-picked bidders. I would have, if you'd asked me 4 years ago if that would have been a consideration, I would have said, well, of course not, we don't do things that way. Regrettably, we have done things that way. So, no backroom deals, no half answers. You won't get different answers depending on who you are or what your situation is. I like the FOIA tracking on the website, but frankly, too often these FOIAs come up with no answer. There is no paper trail. If land is sold, there will be written comps for the value of the land. You will be able to get that. You should be able to get most of this without having to FOIA it. I was a newspaper reporter in my first job out of college, and I did a lot of FOIAing. But equally often, in the city governments I dealt with, we didn't have to FOIA it. We could just ask for it. East Lansing is full of talented, committed people. There's nothing that should be done that's concealed or hidden or requires a lawsuit or a legal procedure to get answers for. Thank you.
Ms. Gregg?
I think the best thing that we can do for transparency in East Lansing is to make sure that the conversations are happening in public. I think too often we feel that by the time a public hearing has been scheduled, many of the details of whatever it is the hearing is about have already been decided upon, and then the input of citizens is heard but not considered. So I think if we could move to a system where council is hearing details at the same time as the public, and that is happening in public, so that questions which are answered are pertinent to the discussion, feedback from all sides can be considered within the same conversation, that would be a huge improvement in the way that things are being done now. I think simply recording the happenings at a meeting and making that public is not enough in terms of actual movement towards public conversation. When the details have been decided in advance, that's just theater, I believe.
Thank you. Mr. Meadows?
I'm next. Let me address a couple of things. First of all, I'm not going to repeat everything that Eric had just mentioned that has already been done to increase the ability of our citizens to know exactly what's going on at City Hall. But we do need better communication within the neighborhoods with regard to any of the events that are occurring there, whether it's replacing the water treatment or transfer facility just off of Harrison Road, and having people call me and say, everything's falling off my walls, I don't know what's going on out here, because there was an inadequate amount of preparation for that neighborhood in terms of the work that was going to be done. Or somebody within a neighborhood who says they started to redo my road and my car was sitting in the driveway, I can't leave my driveway and get to work. Those type of things, should not be happening, and we've talked about how we can improve that kind of communication. When things come to City Council to address some of these other comments, they've already primarily been to other boards and commissions where there has been lengthy public discussion and debate over what should be recommended to the council. The Planning Commission on development projects has already had at least 2 meetings, and often many, many more, where the public has an opportunity to address it. It doesn't come to City Council without a boatload of information already in the hands of the council.
Mr. Rivette?
So to me, part of what we need is better two-way communication to citizens from citizens, and I think that hasn't been as good as it might be. I have praised the current City Council for how they handled the second attempt on tax changes. The open forums that were held in this building and elsewhere were an excellent idea. I wish they had done that on some of the decisions about some of the high-rise buildings downtown and some other things that just seem like changes. I didn't know that was coming, and so I've sort of heard that. I know many people think I'm talking about deer because that's my issue, but the point was that it needed to be addressed, and you can't just say some people are for them and some people are for the hostas. You have to make some choices. And on some of these other issues, there's going to be points where some citizens are going to disagree, and that's not fun. But if we have, and Mark mentioned, we have a lot of commissions. I served on Parks and Rec, I served on the Garden one, and so I know that many things get discussed there, but citizens don't all know some of that. So I would like to see more open community forums, speak more clearly about the visions of what those who've been active are doing, what kind of input they've had, and I look forward to being part of a process that some are calling transparency, I'm calling better communications.
Thank you. Mr. Stanfield?
Well, give me a second. I'm just checking to see if any land went up for sale on eBay while we were talking. First things for certain, I heard Mr. Altman said something about campaign contributions. My number is 0. I don't have any multi-million-dollar friends that are trying to curry my favor. There's no old boy network. It's Warren Stanfield making these decisions, and we're going to be 100% completely transparent. We're going to be 100% completely transparent with the media. We're going to be open with the public, and we're going to make sure that that's not an issue anymore. If you have a question, I'll answer them promptly, and I'll answer them on time, and I'll be truthful and honest in everything that I do. That's something I can promise you.
Thank you. We're going to begin now the second question, and Ms. Babcock, you will be the first person to answer this one, and then we'll go down and come back to Mr. Altman. The next question is, what concrete steps will you take to repair the relationship between East Lansing and Michigan State University?
Thank you. Oops. Thank you. I have already taken some steps. I have many contacts over at Michigan State, as, who are we kidding, everybody in this room probably does. And I have begun speaking with people about what they want from the city as far as communication. And I've been speaking with people as I have met them about what they see the city's proper relationship with MSU is. The truth of the matter is we wouldn't be East Lansing without MSU. And really, MSU wouldn't be MSU without East Lansing. We have a lot in common. We've had some difficult patches. I had the distinct and dubious honor of earning a law degree from Michigan State University only months later to see my alma mater on CNN for burning police cars. That wasn't really good for job hunting, but nevertheless, she persisted. One thing I certainly will not do is stalk out of a meeting with the university president when we're trying to negotiate things. I think that's highly inappropriate, and that signals our need for change. Thank you.
Ms. Gregg?
My current association with the university comes primarily through collaborative projects that have come through the Arts Commission. So that is, so speaking to the way that we've built those relationships, I would say that approaching MSU not just from the top down, but from the perspective of working with individual departments on projects that their students are engaged in. We've benefited from a program called the Citizen Scholars Program that encourages MSU students to work within the community and find community development projects to work with. The ones that I've been engaged with have been artistic because I've come through the Arts Commission, but I believe that there's other programs like that in other university departments. And so if we can find ways to integrate town life with gown life throughout the university and not just from the top down, I think they will start to see us more as partners as opposed to a conflictual relationship.
Mr. Meadows?
The relationship with the university, I've been involved in quarterly meetings with the university and university meetings since 1995 when I was first elected to the city council. And as the state representative from this area, I continued to meet with the university on various issues involving East Lansing in particular. So I've been around for a long time meeting with the university, and I guess whoever stalked out of a meeting with the university president must have been somebody I don't know, because it never happened while I was around. And I might add that we have over 159 different agreements with the university, cooperative agreements where we cooperate, not just police and fire, but all kinds of arrangements with the university. We have created a university student commission in which our university students serve on and make recommendations to the city council. We at these quarterly meetings, we have very candid conversations about where the university wants to go and where the city wants to go, and the things that are happening in both that we can help each other deal with. So, I think the premise of this question, that there is something to repair here, is wrong to begin with. There is something to continue here, which is our relationship with the university. We have a symbiotic relationship that's very strong and very important to both organizations.
Mr. Rivette?
I'll try to make 4 quick points. One, my job as grievance official meant that I've dealt with deans, directors, and chairs across campus, and a lot of time was in the admin building. We would say, "You going to the 4th floor today?" And I would say, "Yep." I think we have a real opportunity with the new leadership at the university. I'm holding the new president's letter of August 23rd, where he says, "I'm impressed by the cooperation I see between MSU and you neighboring communities, our partners in East Lansing. We can help work together to connect trails, safely accommodate bikes and e-scooters." And so I think there's some real opportunity with new leadership at the university. One of my suggestions was taking the kind of from the human resources area. You want to find out what other similar communities or in labor relations, other unions or other employers are doing in benefits or other things. Maybe we could do a better job of finding out how are other university towns working with their university. And so I'd like to help in that kind of area. I understand that I've heard Mark say that number a couple times, and I'm impressed that we do that much, but I still wonder, do we really take advantage of the expertise of some of MSU? Because I think some of the kind of issues we have, there are probably some people that studied that or done things, and I sometimes wonder, and also with Lansing Community College, I think we could improve.
Mr. Altman? Oops, excuse me, Mr. Stanfield.
I go to Michigan State University. I went to Michigan State University when Richard Spencer, the alt-right extremist, came to campus, and I protested that. I went to Michigan State University, and I wrestled at Michigan State University when Larry Nassar came through. I stood with our girls for that. And I went to Michigan State University this year when flat rate tuition came through, and that hurt the black community, and that hurt the Mexican community, and the Indian community, and the minority communities of students on campus. I didn't see the East Lansing government there for Richard Spencer. I didn't see the East Lansing government there when Larry Nassar came through the athletic department. I didn't see the Michigan State government, the East Lansing government there for flat rate tuition. You may know people at Michigan State University, but I am a Spartan. I can speak to our issues better than I know you can. That's all I got to say.
Now, Mr. Altman.
So I agree with John that we have a huge opportunity now with new leadership at MSU to engage on a bunch of shared policy goals, and I want to talk about some of those goals. And the key point is that they're shared, they're good for us, and they're good for MSU, and that's how we're going to engage with MSU. One of them is to get more faculty and staff and graduate students living close to campus. I think that would be huge for our neighborhoods. It would be good for the faculty and staff and graduate students because they could walk to work and bike to work. And it would help with traffic congestion on campus, which is a problem. MSU is this huge engine of applied research, and there is no reason that we shouldn't be commercializing more of that research right here in our downtown instead of off in some industrial park somewhere. It would be as convenient as it gets for the faculty there because they could walk across, talk to their employees, and walk back and talk to their grad students within a couple of minutes. So that would be good for them, and it would be good for us. I think it's also time to encourage MSU to reestablish a lifelong learning program where faculty teach people in the community and carry on classes that are community-based classes, because we have a vital, dynamic primetime program here, and I think they would really benefit from it. And MSU faculty could put those outreach courses on their VITAs, which is what counts for faculty. So I think the way forward is to engage on shared policy goals that add to the environment, that add to East Lansing, and that make improvements for MSU at the same time.
Thank you. If anyone in the audience still has a card that they would like or question, if you'd raise your card, someone will come pick it up before we go on to the next question. Okay. Whoop, there's one up here in the front row. Question number 3 deals with climate change. The first part is a yes/no question, and then it asks you to expand upon your answer. The question is, and Ms. Gregg, you'll be the first person on this one. Do you think the City of East Lansing has a responsibility to act on the issue of climate change and sustainability? Would you be willing to fund a sustainability manager for the City of East Lansing?
Yes, I do think that we have a responsibility to act on climate change. I think anything that we can do to slow the corrosion of our environment is all to the benefit of our future, as well as our current. And in terms of a sustainability manager, I think that sounds like an excellent idea. I think personnel funding at the city is extremely tight, so finding the money for that would be a trick, but I think it would probably be worth it. I'm not sure if that would be a full-time job or a part-time job, or if that could be some responsibilities that would be included in employee descriptions that we already have. So I think yes is the short answer, with some more complicated details to be worked out.
Mr. Meadows?
I think most people here know that I'm very heavily associated with the Sierra Club in Michigan as the political chair of the political committee, and with the National Sierra Club as on the national political team as the federal endorsements chair. I'm completely committed to us addressing climate change, and I think that as a program, as a methodology, we have to encourage this across the nation from smaller units of government, because we're pushing back against a federal government which seems to have abandoned its ability and desire to address this issue. So I agree completely that we should be having this at the forefront of our policy making in the city of East Lansing. As to a particular position with regard to management, I think that as we develop programs and policies within the city, we could determine whether we need a specific individual to be doing this. We do have people who are dedicated to protecting the environment and promoting environmental awareness within this community who are already working for us. And it may be that we have somebody on staff who can actually fill this position at this point in time.
Mr. Rivette?
One of the 7 questionnaires that I answered was one for the League of Women Voters, where we were asked something along this line. And I said that, of course, I would encourage more citizens to conserve more resources, join the solar park, conduct MSU East Lansing forums on the issues we face. I'd like to see not just major issues and suggestions, but also practical ideas, what individual citizens might do in addition to what the city might do. I suggested that clearly we have some real problems in terms of the deluge of rain followed by no rain at all, and things are different, and I've talked to the county about that, and some of our capacity is not there for that. We're going to have to look into that. The last thing I suggested was we need to encourage voters to support candidates for president, Congress, state legislature, et cetera, who are dedicated to looking into climate change issues, and that to me is one of the most important things that I can do as an individual. In terms of the particular of this particular idea, I don't know if it's a good one or not. I would like certain to listen to those who advocate it, but I'd like to know, do we have the right number of people in all kinds of departments? Do we have wasteful overlaps in terms of people assigned to different areas? And could we do a better job as a local government? So.
Mr. Stanfield?
So we all want climate change to cease, but the issue is how are we going to go about that? So there's a couple of different ways we can go about that. Either whether it be a state grant, a federal grant, a manager. I feel like we need to make sure that we're stretching the amount of finances that are already in play and making sure we're taking advantages of programs like permeable pavement reduction, increasing, and MSU's 4-H climate change programs. These are programs that already exist, but we may not be taking full advantage of. We already see that we're not the best with our finances at times, right? But if there's programs in place, whether it be at the federal or the state level, that we can take advantage of, we need to make sure we're making that happen.
Thank you. And Mr. Altman?
I think the idea of a sustainability manager portfolio is very interesting. I don't know if that's a separate person or a job that is assigned to one person along with other jobs, but I think it's an interesting idea. It's important to recognize that good environmental policy is also good for the bottom line typically, and this is one of the reasons that things like solar panels on city buildings make a lot of sense. It's why moving to electric vehicle fleets would make an awful lot of sense, because you don't have oil changes on those things. They cost nothing to run. They're big go-karts, as we know, because we own an electric vehicle. There are other things we could do. We need to start requiring green roofs for big development projects that will help with stormwater management as well as reducing energy costs. Permeable pavement is a great idea, requiring that in a wider range of projects. So there are a whole bunch of things that we can do that are good for the bottom line and good for the environment. And yes, we have to do it because the state and the feds are not carrying their weight.
Ms. Babcock?
Thank you. Thank you. This is right in my wheelhouse. I spent 10 years working in energy, particularly green energy. I wrote the plan, the 21st Century Energy Plan that brought green energy to Michigan, and I wrote the legislation that made it happen. So I'm passionate about this. I was once Al Yukon science writer, but that's a whole different story. We can do so many things. Something I learned in the legislature was never let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So 6 months ago, there was a discussion at a city council meeting about green energy, and there was sort of a discussion that, well, we don't want to buy it, we want to generate it. And I agree, we do want to generate it, but on our way to generating it, because that can take up to 5 years, we want to buy it, and we want to buy it now. This is a crucial issue, and we don't have time to waste. So if someone comes to us and wants to develop a building, we can tell them, look, you're going to put on a white roof. You're going to do certain things. We have PACE programs and LEED programs. There is so much we can do. I'm about to be cut off, and I do tend to yammer on this point. Please email me. I have an ongoing conversation about a greenhouse gas carbon reduction plan for East Lansing that's been quite active. You can join by emailing, and I'll let those who are less interested move along. Thank you.
Thank you. We've had several questions about development, and so we'll move on to this one. Some view the current city administration and council as too lenient with developers and giving away city assets to please them. What's your view on this issue, and how does your previous experience help you in negotiating with big-time developers? And the first person to respond to this is Mr. Meadows.
Well, that would be good for me to respond to it, I guess. First of all, I don't think we've been lenient at all. So I would disagree with the premise of the question. If you look at the deals that have been established, we've had, as this council, the Hub, which is a student apartment building on the corner of Grand River and Bogue Street. We have the Center City project, which took months and months of negotiation. We retained the ownership of the property, and we are receiving almost $1 million in revenues as a result of the agreements that were reached there. We're also using tax increment financing to construct public infrastructure at that location, and that's essentially a program that requires the developer to loan the city the money, and then we pay them back with the money they pay us in their taxes. And the center and the Park District project, which is going up, that has 3 different iterations. We approved it 3 times with different things associated with it, and as a result, we got a better product, a hotel, and this apartment building, and low to moderate income housing, and senior housing in Center City. So we haven't been lenient at all. We've been very aggressive in protecting the city's resources and making sure that these products that are coming in are things that we can be proud of.
Mr. Rivette?
So I don't know the answer, I'm too lenient or not. I do know that I think in America we tend to be too lenient in terms of what we allow developers and businesses to do, and sometimes do the most incredibly foolish things in tax breaks. I've been told we haven't been doing that as a city here. One reason I somewhat believe that, besides I trust a few of these people, when I was on Parks and Rec, we talked about development in the Evergreen area because it was an edge of a park. That was 15 years ago. We talked about doing something over on Bogue Street across the street, and that was 13 years ago. So we sometimes, if anything, spend a lot of time talking about things and not moving forward. But I'm not, in answering some of the questions, I said I'm not in favor of tax breaks, and I think we need to be more thoughtful, and one of my positions is to probably have a moratorium on more high-rise student apartments till we know as a tri-county area how much need really is there. And so I would push for that. But I also think there are other things we can do to make them very successful, and I'll talk about that in another question.
Mr. Stanfield?
Has anybody been inside the Hub? Place looks like it was thrown together by duct tapes and glue sticks. It's falling apart. I'm going to negotiate with developers, but I'm going to make sure we hire the right people for the job, and I'm going to make sure they do it the right way. There's people getting hurt in there. That wasn't the best construction job, and that wasn't the best representation of East Lansing. We got to be better with the way we negotiate with these people. We got to make sure that they do things the right way. That's just how I feel about it.
Mr. Altman?
So I want to describe what happened with the Center City project, which is the one with the target in it, because it illustrates the policy that we have followed with respect to development. The developer there built a parking garage with their money for the city. The city will own that parking garage. We will use that parking garage to generate revenue, which will help pay for the cost of services consumed by the people who live in that project. That project is going to pay for itself. We made sure of that in the negotiations. The mechanism we're using to do this is called tax increment financing, where the developer fronts the money for some infrastructure that we want, and we pay the developer back with their taxes. If we don't use tax increment financing aggressively to buy infrastructure that the city needs and wants, then we are leaving money on the table. If we had used bonding to pay for that garage, we would be responsible for 100% of the cost. If we pay for infrastructure using tax increment financing, we pay 25 cents on the dollar for that infrastructure, because we get to use all the taxes that we collect and otherwise distribute to other jurisdictions like the airport and CATA and all these other jurisdictions that we collect taxes for. So we are using other people's money to buy infrastructure for us, and we are doing that aggressively, and if we weren't doing it that way, then we wouldn't be doing our jobs.
Ms. Babcock?
Thank you. Thank you. I have heard a lot from people, and I agree that developers seem to be wagging the dog. This community has agreed to 8 stories. That's in our master plan. That's what we've said we want. And if someone wants to come here, I say, welcome. But you're coming here to develop something because this is a great community, because you want to be part of it. So if developers are going to come here, they're going to pay their fair share, and they're going to heed what we want. If they say we must have 18 stories, my answer to them is, number one, we're not your bank, we're not your financing plan. I will listen to why it is you want 14 stories, but then you're going to listen to this community as to why we think 8 is appropriate. That's our role as City Council, is to represent the public will. Last summer, the city did a master plan, and people spent hours giving their ideas and participating. I didn't participate. My dad was very ill. But I followed along from home. Lastly, when we give TIFs, we may be using other people's money, but that money is often money that would go to Ingham County, to CATA, to the school boards. So if you want to use other people's money, but that's our kids' money, I'm going to think long and hard before I'm willing to agree to that. Thank you.
Ms. Gregg?
When we talk about public assets, 2 things come to mind. I'm not sure exactly what was in the mind of this questioner. I don't know if this has been thoroughly discussed, but we have at least one development and one in proposal that puts privately owned structures on leased public property. And I think that is long-term leases of publicly owned land that then have permanent structures on them is a way to avoid putting that land up for sale, which would require a vote. And I think that is not the right way to use our residents' property. And I'm also going to echo what Lisa said in regards to the idea of using other people's money to fund our infrastructure. Not only is that other people's money, but it is money that our residents have voted for specific millages, such as the Ingham County Trails and Parks millage, which I see thousands of dollars of tax capture sucked out of that and going into infrastructure that is not what those people wanted, which is not what they voted to spend their money on. I think when our residents vote to support a millage for our schools, our libraries, our trails, our public transportation system, that we owe it to them to use it for that purpose. And so we should be much more deliberate when we make tax finance plans that reroute that money to other purposes.
Question number 5 deals with rental scooters. What is your view of how the city should respond to the presence of rental scooters in its jurisdiction, and should a speed limit of 25 miles per hour be set? And the first responder is Mr. Rivette.
I wish I was last on this one because I don't know much on this topic. But I do know that there are times when I walk between my house in Lantern Hill and the top of the Bailey neighborhood and go to campus when I fear for my life. We have real problems in terms of who should be on sidewalks, who should be in the street, between not just that, but also skateboards, rollerblades, drivers that are texting. And I'm only fearful that it'll get worse when people aren't just drunk, but they're also high. We need to work with MSU on this. We need to work with the county. We need to work with our adjacent communities. 25 sounds awful fast to me. If I'm walking down the street or walking my dog, that I don't know all the answers, but I think we need to look at this and look with some other people who have experience and what, like I say, other college towns have done about this.
Mr. Stanfield?
I agree with Mr. Rivette. We do have problems. We have problems that are very serious, and I do not think that we should be spending too much time of our police department clocking scooters and making sure that everyone is going under 25. And you talk about Michigan State University's involvement in this. Okay, so you're going to have Michigan State University cops speedometering scooters, East Lansing cops speedometering scooters, and we just are trying to figure out what the deal was with them and the amount of money that they got from that new the tax that was passed, right? We haven't. There are still issues that we need to solve within our police department. There are still things that we need to do for our police department. We don't even have that great of a relationship with the MSU police department. Let's not spend too much time on these ticky-tacky issues that we are not 100% ready to tackle yet. Let's make sure that the real issues are solved first.
Mr. Altman?
So not to pick nits, but I don't think they go faster than 15 miles per hour, and that's what we learned in the deliberations last year. We actually set a speed limit of 10 miles per hour in the DDA, the downtown district. We thought about using the GPS facilities on these scooters. You can geo-fence the scooters so that when they're in a particular region, they have a different speed limit than when they're in a different region. And this sounds like a really attractive way to limit the speed of scooters in particular areas like the downtown where it's congested. But then what happens when somebody's riding their scooter and they cross the boundary and suddenly it speeds up by 5 miles per hour suddenly? We thought this was a safety issue, so we did not require in our ordinance that companies geofence their scooter speeds in that way. We just instituted a speed limit. Look, I think this is a great and interesting and disruptive technology it's going to annoy people until everybody gets used to it. I'm already seeing deployment issues. They're being scattered all over the sidewalks in the neighborhoods, the Lime scooters are, and we have to solve that because people then can't get down the sidewalk, and if they're visually impaired or have other disabilities, then it's a problem. So we have to figure out how to solve that. Ultimately, I think we want all modes of transportation to have as much flexibility as makes sense. So I'm okay with them on the sidewalks as long as we have a culture where that kind of thing works. I'm okay with bikes on the sidewalks. I think we can look to other places as a model. We can look to the Netherlands for a place where the bikes rule. And so I don't want scooters to rule, but I think everybody can get along.
Ms. Babcock?
I have mixed feelings about the scooters. On the one hand, they look like a lot of fun, but I'm the one who tumbled off a nice lady's porch the other day, and I'm still injured. I thought about getting on a scooter just for comic value, but, well, you know. When I had students at MSU, I would tell them, for the love of God, wear helmets. Do you know how much money you've spent on your minds before you go crashing? They look like a lot of fun. I do have a sister who uses a wheelchair, and when I see them parked in the middle of a sidewalk, I go bonkers because that impedes ability for people to maneuver on a public way. Beyond that, they kind of look like fun, and at this point, if that's the worst thing the kids are doing, let's encourage them.
Ms. Gregg?
I think the most recent rollout of the scooters was much smoother than the drop-in run that we experienced last year. I think that was evidence of some ongoing conversations with the city, and I think that we saw some distinct improvement in that. There's been deployment areas marked out around town. There's one directly across the street from my square, or from my store. It's a nice little square on the sidewalk where 5 scooters will fit nicely side by side. And since it has been outlined, it has had 3 Vespas from my upstairs neighbors parked in it quite neatly. I think when when the city negotiated with these companies and set licensing fees for these, there was some talk about using those fees for rider education, signage, safe streets initiatives, and I think I would really like to see that followed through on. I don't know if we've seen anything about the revenue yet, but we could definitely use rider education downtown. We're discouraging cars in our downtown core. We're not, forbidding them, but we've moved residents closer to campus. That's not going to turn everyone into pedestrians. We have to understand that that's going to be different types of traffic: bikes, scooters, Vespas, skateboards, and that is the reality. And we should implement infrastructure to deal with that.
Mr. Meadows?
My wife and I were in Europe this summer for a brief period, and what struck me most about the cities that we were in was all the scooters that were in these cities. They were everywhere, as were bicycles and other forms of pedestrian or transportation that were not really hooked to the car. That doesn't mean there aren't cars in these big cities in Europe. It just means that they're smaller, but also that there are other modes of transportation that seem to be utilized much more extensively than they are in the United States. I agree with Eric. I think that we will get used to this as time goes on. This is something new for us, but it seems to be part of the culture in Europe, and I think it will become part of the culture here because it seems to be very popular. I think that the ordinances that we passed last year were directed at trying to make it safer for pedestrians and scooters and everybody else who might be operating. And some of the things that we're going to be doing going forward to, I think, encourage safer bike travel, something like what you might see on Bogue Street at this point in time, but putting that on Abbott, putting that on Bircham, those type of changes and restricting scooters to that area might help alleviate the worry John might have about getting run over by a scooter on his way to campus.
Thanks.
Our next question deals with neighborhoods. What are your plans to preserve and strengthen our neighborhoods near the downtown? And the first responder is Mr. Stanfield.
First of all, with some of these neighborhoods downtown, for example, Bailey, we have to make sure that these landlords are not just selling kids whatever they can, get on the market. Because if you've been inside some of these homes, they're not of the highest quality of condition. So if anything, if we're talking about preserving the neighborhoods, especially towards downtown, we need to make sure that the landlords are actually putting in the money to keep these properties valuable. That's why so many of them are for rent this year, because they're not worth some of the money that these landlords are asking for. It's because they're not putting some of the money back into these homes.
Mr. Altman?
One of the most important things we could do to strengthen the neighborhoods close to the downtown is to figure out a way to make some of those student rental properties more attractive as family rental properties. We need more family rental housing close to campus anyway. And we've actually laid the groundwork for making this happen with all the development projects we've approved, which are very popular. These student apartment buildings across from campus are very popular. The Hub and the Landmark basically filled up before they were even open. So now students have an option for another place to live, which means we have the possibility to try to convert some of these single-family homes back to use by single families, whether it's owner-occupied or rental. And so we need to develop some policies to do this. It's a little like burying power lines. It's a long-term project. We need to put some policies into place now so that something will happen eventually. We also need to maintain our current rental restriction ordinances in their current form. It does no good to the neighborhoods to start poking holes in our rental restriction ordinances, People forget how much work it took to preserve owner occupancy in this town of 50,000 people with 30,000 people who want to rent. We're going to have rental restriction ordinances. What we need to do is figure out how to convert existing student rental housing into family rental housing. That will not be easy, but that's our best course of action for strengthening downtown neighborhoods.
Ms. Babcock?
Thank you. I think the best use of those large downtown buildings is to draw students back closer to the university. However, I think it's perhaps Pollyanna-ish to suggest that they're all going to move there, or that the homes that they vacate in, say, the Bailey area are going to be suitable for young families. There's a long way to go with some of those properties before any of us would move in, or before we'd want our children or grandchildren renting there. That said, a lot of the kids like them because they say it's cheaper still than renting in the new high-rise buildings. This is something that has been an issue in East Lansing for time immemorial. I grew up next door in Lansing in the 80s. It was an issue then in East Lansing, and rental and balancing it. I think to strengthen the downtown neighborhoods, the city is going to have to take an active role. I have heard discussion at City Council about sort of an accelerated condemnation process. I would not support that, but I think that the city is going to have to decide how much we want to commit city efforts to being part of that, and how much we want to put requirements on landlords. It's not a 30-second answer. Thank you.
Ms. Gregg?
Would you mind repeating the question?
Sure.
I want to make sure I'm speaking directly to it. Sorry, not to delay things. Yeah. Was it specific to downtown, or was it the entire?
Oh, here. It was how do you keep, my goodness, here it is. What are your plans to preserve and strengthen our neighborhoods near the downtown?
Okay. That's what I thought. I thought it was downtown specific. I do actually agree that we have a unique opportunity with so much new and desirable student-centered rental property coming online close to campus to encourage movement of either owner-occupied family housing in the near-in neighborhoods, or family rental housing. I don't think that's going to happen organically, though. I think that will happen. That will need some encouragement from council. I think, speaking to the level of well-used, let's say, quality of some of those student rentals close to campus, possibly some sort of construction loan or down payment assistance to encourage owner-occupied families to move into those houses that might need a little bit of help. Certainly converting some of them into family rentals, but then that would require, the landlords upgrading them to a standard that family would want to live in, which is a little bit different than somebody that's only planning to be there for 9 months. So I think, encouraging a mix in those neighborhoods that have been primarily student occupied would be a good, we do have an opportunity to do that, but I also think citywide we do need more family rentals. So that would be another project.
Mr. Meadows?
Yeah, we began as a community to protect our neighborhoods by adopting historic districts within the community. There's a provision in the historic district ordinance in the state statute which prevents demolition by neglect, and that was the first designation to try to preserve the look, at least, of our close-in neighborhoods, our older neighborhoods. And then we followed it with a series of rental ordinances that didn't seem to stop the spread of rental housing into the neighborhoods. Then we followed that with Ordinance 900, which had a very ameliorative effect within the community, but it didn't really stop too much of it until we had the overlay zones that were passed. And we just recently rejected some changes to overlay zones so that we could continue to preserve the family lifestyles within our neighborhoods. I think we need to keep on doing that, and particularly because we now have the onset, like scooters are new, so is Airbnb. And we have to be careful, not just to protect our neighborhoods that are close in, but our neighborhoods that are a little further out, because the type of activity that can disrupt a neighborhood over a weekend, a football weekend or a basketball weekend, is just as destructive to lifestyles as the type of activity we used to see in these close-in neighborhoods. And let me just quickly say, we need more low to moderate income housing in the city, and we need more family housing, and there are
Thank you.
programs for it.
Mr. Rivette?
So I hope the new apartments help promote more owner-occupied, more family rentals. To the extent that doesn't work, I hope we continue with the overlay and the historic district work, and we work closely to try to keep improving tenant landlord relations. We are a college town. We've done a lot over the years. Things are much better, I think, in student and long-term resident relations than they were years ago. And I hope we can continue that. As somebody in the Bailey neighborhood, though, we do have maybe a dozen Friday and Saturday nights plus St. Pat's Day and Halloween, when things are a little less than what might be ideal for those of us that live close to such activities, and maybe the city could do some more to encourage better behaviors, less inebriated behaviors. And I really am amazed at how much trash young people throw on the ground in these parties, and yet then we talk about being environmentally conscious. It just, I'm very thankful we have people who collect bottles and then take them to the QD and other places to turn them in, because that at least helps keep us a little cleaner. I don't know what we can do as a city, but that's a real problem.
Our next question deals with the, Mr. Stanfield, you spoke
Already
to this
went.
one, didn't you?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay,
very
that's
much.
what I thought. Okay, I thought everybody had done that one. This one deals with the arts. East Lansing calls itself the City of the Arts. Now the Art Festival and the Summer Solstice Festival are not sure that they will be continuing into the future. How are you going to address the issue of retaining these and other festivals? And Mr. Altman, you will begin answering this one.
Well, that is the first that I've heard of either of these festivals, any doubt being about either of these festivals continuing. I think we have new leadership for the Arts Festival, and we look forward to a thriving arts community over the summer with all these, with that and with the Jazz Festival. These are well-attended events. They're really important to the community. They bring people into the community. They bring us together. The quality of the work that gets shown there and the quality of the music that gets played at the Jazz Festival are terrific. We're on the map because of these things. And so I certainly would intend to continue all the support that we've given to these festivals in the future. And I'm frankly not sure where these rumors are coming from.
Ms. Babcock?
Thank you. Well, changes to the Arts Festival as proposed are on the city's website, and one of the plan is to convert the Art Festival from a 501c3, from a separate nonprofit, to being run by a board or commission appointed by the city. The city's boards and commissions are great, and they're made up of dedicated, committed people. However, I know from having taught law and public policy at MSU's Arts and Cultural Management program that arts donors are incredibly generous, but they want to be sure that the donations they make are going to be committed to the arts. And we saw this with Detroit years ago when it decoupled, if you will, the Detroit Institute of Arts, because people were afraid that their arts donations were going to go on to fill potholes. So I would like to see the city do whatever it takes to restore the relationship with the art fair, to bring it back to how it had been traditionally run. These are the cornerstone of our identity. This is taking away the art fair or the jazz festival would be like taking away the library or Michigan State. This is in our DNA. It's who we are as a community. And I would wholly support anything that keeps the arts active, vibrant, and who we are. Thank you.
Ms. Gregg?
This is probably the only time in this entire campaign where I can proudly say that I hold a fine art degree from Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota, and actually have that be germane to the discussion. So I am a professional artist, and I can speak to this problem. We discussed quite lengthily at the last Arts Commission meeting the plan to fully absorb the Arts Festival into the city. And I think, it does solve some untidy loose ends that caused problems last year, but I think it is very short-sighted in terms of funding. That the amount of fundraising that board is responsible for, as well as the opportunity to apply for additional grants by having a 501 nonprofit designation, giving up that opportunity is frankly short-sighted. So I'm optimistic that is revisited. But regardless, if I'm elected, I'm well situated to speak to the arts. I've been involved in that festival specifically, and I have organized other arts festivals independent of that. So I would fight to preserve all of those.
Mr. Meadows?
Well, this is also the first time I've heard that anybody thinks that either of these festivals is going to be eliminated within the city. I think that there's a strong commitment not only by the city council and the city administration, but also by the citizens in this community to preserve these festivals. The Art Festival is our oldest festival. It's one that is nationally recognized. There was just a press release today as we were determined to be the 65th best art festival in the nation, with announcing a new director for the Art Festival and a new way of approaching how it was going to be managed. It's somebody who's been associated for a number of years in the management of the Jazz Festival, and she will also be responsible for that. I was just at a fundraiser a few weeks ago where we raised a significant amount of money to help fund the Jazz Festival. I can't imagine anybody there or anybody on City Council thinking we're going to be eliminating either one of these festivals that are so important to the city of East Lansing. This comment that I just heard about the city's website, I'm not sure what that means, because generally speaking, friends of the Jazz Festival, friends of the Art Festival, friends of the library are independent organizations that raise money and donate. So I don't think the city has the ability to eliminate that.
Mr. Yvette?
So as I said earlier, I've helped with all three festivals and a very big proponent. I think they really are in our DNA, as was just mentioned. The world changes, though. Besides, there's no longer Jacobsons and Liebermans. There also aren't as many galleries downtown. Roy Saper has an absolutely wonderful gallery that's like a museum, an art museum. We used to have more, but many of them went to Old Town, just like many of the restaurants that used to bring people downtown are now up in East Town. But we can get more back in downtown East Lansing. We can have exciting restaurants. I bet we will have galleries again looking at the future. And I think we can help, as a city, help promote some of that. Partly it's working with MSU more creatively, maybe other communities around us. I agree. I think it's a little bit sad recently to call ourselves the City of the Arts, and it felt like we really weren't quite where we had been, or at least for some of us who have been around a long time, it seems different. But the future could be better. Thank you.
Mr. Stanfield?
I have to comment on Ms. Baddock's comments on the Detroit situation with their art department. It's to my knowledge that the DIA liquidated and donated a large portion of its art collection to mitigate the city's Title IX bankruptcy. It was not snatched involuntarily. But I think everybody loves the art festival. There's beautiful art, summer, great food, students art here. We have to make sure that that's something that we continue to have. It's a very peaceful time. It's a great time to be a member of the East Lansing community. It's the biggest event we have over the summer. I loved it. I felt like that was one of the first times I was actually a member of this community. I'll do everything in my power to make sure that still continues.
Thank you. Everyone answered that question. I believe this is our final question, and then we'll have closing statements. It's 8:15. So this one deals with city finance. As stewards of the city's finances, what are your views on how best to help our city meet its obligations and still grow? What examples from your past can you point to, either in office or otherwise, that show your philosophy on this? And Ms. Babcock, you get to begin this one.
I do have all the luck. I went to law school because I was promised no math, but the first place where we start is to stop with some of the tax breaks that are being given to the new development. New development is welcome, but it has to pay its fair share. We saw comments from some of the incumbents that they do not support tax breaks for developers, but they've approved $64 million in tax breaks for developers, including $1.8 million for Costco. Costco has billions of dollars in sales, and they can fend for themselves. Target downtown, these folks are great. They can fend for themselves. We need to look out for the city's bottom line, and we don't do that by granting tax breaks or also by granting tax breaks that take it from the school's bottom line. That's really where it has to start. There's a level of responsibility, and sometimes that means not being liked or not being popular with the people who are standing before you asking for these tax breaks. Beyond that, we've got our $9 million. I think that's going to cover what some people call unfunded liabilities, and I happen to call people who worked really hard for the city that we made promises to that we are going to keep. I do not want to see taxes increased. My much better half and I were not particularly thrilled with the tax break we got after the property tax, income tax.
Ms. Gregg?
I think we don't know where we're at quite yet with city finances. We just had a really big shakeup in our income structure with the income tax, and it's not yet exactly clear how much we'll be getting from that. At least I referenced $9 million. I believe that's a reference to the entire amount. So a lot of that was lost compensating for the property tax reduction, and then there is 40% of that that's entailed for public safety and infrastructure and parks. So functionally, about $2.5 million is going towards our pension liabilities, which is really not enough to make progress on that. We need to find ways to put additional money towards that in order to really see it go down. And that's going to probably mean some more cuts budget-wise. Hopefully, some of the new income streams will be higher than expected, but we're definitely not out of the woods, and it's still going to be pretty tough.
Mr. Meadows?
Yeah, I agree that we're not out of the woods, and we need to be vigilant about the city's finances. We have made a great improvement, and it's the result of the work that was done within our community, the people voting to, I guess I would say, really change the way that we fund city government by reducing some property taxes and putting that in the charter, but also to implement the income tax so that we can gather money from people who use our services on a daily basis, but weren't paying for those services in a way that we could see easily. Through the income tax, now they are paying for some of these services. As Jesse mentioned, we end up with 60% of any revenue that we receive from the income tax going towards the pay down of the unfunded liability relating to pensions in the city, 20% for public safety and 20% for infrastructure. We don't know exactly yet how much money we're going to receive from the income tax, so we have to be careful about how we budget any of this money going forward. But I will note that this year in the budget, we have $4.5 million going towards the pension pay down. And should we get additional money, which it looks like we might be getting someday if the legislature actually passes a budget that doesn't get line item vetoed, we're going to get additional money this year, and we should be using that towards additional pay down of that pension.
Mr. Rivette?
So we were asked to answer a questionnaire. There were 4 questions, and one was sort of in this area, and I answered about revenue. Begin by careful review of the impact of the recent property and income tax changes and resultant revenue realities over some amount of time of looking at that. I said we should continue discussions with state, county, neighboring communities regarding that, and perhaps sharing more services, perhaps more coordination of what's called back of the house services. We attempted one with the fire departments of Lansing and East Lansing. It's not still going, but I don't know that those kind of things can't be done, and maybe some have to be more behind the scenes sort of sharing. You ask about personal, though. I ran 2 501c3s, one on occupational health and doctors and one on the labor and industrial history of Detroit. I'm very careful with money, mine and other people. I'm living on my 403B and 457 and some Social Security funds. So I'm not wasteful with anyone's money, including mine, or what I'll be legacy to my children.
Mr. Stanfield?
Growing up, my parents ran a restaurant, Young's Barbecue. Some of my earliest memories are me and my grandmother Sunday afternoon. She's got this giant calculator, crunching the numbers, trying to figure out how she can get some extra barbecue sauce in the budget. But more recently, I worked on the budget that's being passed by the state legislature. No money is allocated through the state of Michigan before it passes through the Senate. I have a wealth of experience working with monies and making sure things stretch. I'm a Democrat, but I am not a fan of spending frivolously. I will make sure that every dollar goes to something that we need.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all the candidates for their answers and also, oh, I'm sorry. I've already checked your name off for some reason, Mr. Altman. Go ahead.
So I want to correct something that was said earlier. We approved $64 million in new infrastructure, and that includes a garage that the city will own to generate revenue, as well as a new sewer in the downtown, a realignment of Albert Avenue to deal with the safety issues there. So that's what we've approved as tax increment financing for infrastructure. And the schools actually don't lose. We capture their taxes, but the state makes them whole for that. So tax increment financing is actually a way to get the state to pay for something, which is yet another reason why we need to use it aggressively. Our income tax collections through June, halfway through the year, were $5.4 million. That is right on track to hit the $10 million goal that we were aiming for. If you factor in about 10% for refunds, we won't know the full story until about this time next year. We know how much we gave back to East Lansing residents, which was $5 million, so we're going to net $5 million from the tax restructuring, which is exactly what we aimed for. And yes, we have to do everything we can to try to pay off our pension obligations, but certainly it did matter, this tax restructuring, because the state is off our back. They put us on notice that our pension funding was an issue for them, and we had to submit a plan to them, and we handed them the income tax, and that was the plan, and they said, okay, you are fine. So that is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, and that was our best option for dealing with our financial issues. We also have to keep making sure that development projects pay for themselves, and we have to reduce the cost of city operations by whatever means we can.
Thank you. Thank you now to all the candidates for answering the questions and for all of the questions that you, as an audience, submitted. Unfortunately, we're not able to get to many of them, and I hope that we covered a broad spectrum of questions that you had. We'll now begin the 1-minute closing statements, and these will be given in reverse order of the opening statements. So the person that will begin is Ms. Gregg, and you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Feeling all cocky because I had to go last and I forgot I have to go first. But I am fighting hard to win this election. I'm out knocking on doors, so if I haven't gotten to your house yet, hopefully I will be seeing you soon. I feel confident that I would be a good addition to our city government. There are other people in the county that also feel confident that way. I've been endorsed by many of our public servants, including all of our county commissioners that serve East Lansing, 5 of our school board members, and many serving and former city council members. And those are relationships that I will, gain experience and from if I am elected, I will be able to bring my connections into the council. So hopefully this has been compelling enough that you'll vote for me, and if not, I will look for opportunities to convince you.
Thank you. Mr. Stanfield?
All right, my mic's on for sure. I'd like to thank everybody for welcoming me into this community. I'd like to thank everyone for showing up tonight. And I think it's important that we focus on the real issues, the important issues. Like, how are we going to beat Ohio State this weekend? Hey, I don't know.
Mr. Rivette?
So maybe we'll send you to go wrestle some of their players on the sidelines. I look forward to serving on City Council. I think we can promote a clear vision for stable and welcoming neighborhoods downtown, public parks and recreation facilities, better traffic patterns, and address perceived and real parking issues that many people have. I thought about and reached out to a couple people to ask them to endorse me, but Jesse had them all tied up. I hope that when I'm on, I can use some of the skills that I have in working on problem solving and trying to be creative. I think I have some ideas, and I'm willing to listen to people, those that I agree with and those that voted for Donald Trump too. Like was done with the community forum related to taxes, I think we need to do more of that. I'm very excited by how many people showed up tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Babcock?
Thank you. It would be an honor to serve East Lansing. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I love East Lansing. I love the commitment in this community. I love the diversity and the way people are engaged. Areas where I could knock doors where in other towns would take me an hour, like say a precinct, take me 3 days. People are just that committed. They invite you into their homes. They show you their historic homes, and it's just truly an honor. I grew up in public service. My dad was a Milliken guy, and I learned from the golden era of government. So I simply ask you this: 4 years from now, will you want to have continued with what we've got now, or will you want to embrace change? And I ask that you embrace change. Thank you.
Mr. Meadows?
Right. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, but also I'd like to thank all of you for all the times I've been on your porches and you've given me advice. You've told me things are well, and you've told me things are not going so well. I hope you found me to be responsive to the needs of the community, and I know you've honored me for many, many years by putting me on council and making me your state representative, and then putting me back on council, kind of surprisingly. I hope that you will return me once again, that I promise you the same thing that I promised from the beginning. I will work as hard as I can to make East Lansing the best place that it can be.
Mr. Altman?
So 4 years ago, I started talking about an income tax and a property tax cut as a way to try to stabilize the city's finances by growing the tax base. And people told me, yeah, that is all well and good, and it may even work, but it's impossible. And so you may as well save your breath. And now we have, after a lot of work by a lot of people, including me, we have an income tax and a property tax cut, and it's working exactly as it was supposed to work. We're hiring back police and firefighters. We're in the black 5 years out in terms of our budget projections. States off our back in terms of our pension funding. So that was a good decision that we made collectively, and I want to thank many people in this room who contributed to that effort. It was an honor to work with you on that. So we got an important thing done, and now there are new things to get done, as there always are, and I think those should include the sidewalks and solar for city operations, and also starting to bury power lines. I will work hard on those projects, just as I did on the income tax, and I ask for your vote so that I can get started, and please visit ericaltman.com to learn more.
This concludes our candidate forum for the East Lansing City Council. The League of Women Voters would like to thank the candidates for their participation, the Hannes Community Center for hosting this forum, and you for attending. Of course, I have some asks at the same time. One, you should have a questionnaire to evaluate this forum. And also on the back table, there's more information about the League of Women Voters. You'll also find some envelopes that if you would like to support the League of Women Voters, we get our money through donations and membership fees. So if we also have membership applications on the back table. If you would like to become a member of the League or contribute, we would welcome that. There also are applications back there so that you can vote at home. As you know, with the change in the law last year, or this year, the election last year, you no longer have to have a reason to get an absentee ballot. You do have to request that, however. Those applications are on the back table, and we encourage you to fill one of those out. For more information on the candidates, you can go to www.vote411.org or the website for the Lansing League of Women Voters. Remember to vote in the general election on November 5th. And as my button says, democracy isn't a spectator sport. Together we can make democracy continue to work. Thank you for being here.